introduce our guests. So we have with us today Mr. Mike Twitty, who is the Pinellas County property appraiser. And as you know, there are some number of things that are on the ballot this coming November, and one of them is increase in the homestead exemption. We were asked by one of our board members, who's also a county commissioner, to make sure that we are part of the education phase of what this means for all agencies that receive property tax. So from what I understand, I'm sure that Mr. Twitty will get into this. This does not affect the school system, but it does affect the county in a very big way, and the ability for the county to continue infrastructure projects. It also really affects PSTA. And so Debbie will make sure that I get this number right, but we have taken into consideration that it could mean a $2 million difference on an annual basis to our budget. So that could be some very serious service and the amount of service that we can put out on the road, because that is a direct hit to our operating budget. That does not necessarily affect our capital budget as much, because a lot of that comes from our federal grants. So just to understand, that is the effect on PSTA, and with that I'll turn it over to Mr. Twitty to educate us further on what would happen, what the proposal is, and what the potential implications are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Perfect. Well, thank you all for having me. We'll touch on, we'll get pretty deep in the weeds on Amendment 1. Amendment 2 will stay pretty high level on. That one's a little easier to grasp, but Amendment 1 has a lot of things under the hood, so I'll try and touch on those things. First of all, just to give you a quick overview, Property Appraiser's Office, you know, I'm not the tax collector, so don't shoot me, at least not more than once. But anyway, the Property Appraiser's Office values about 450,000 parcels each year. That's real estate and tangible personal property throughout all of Pinellas County. We're on basically a 5-year cycle to put eyes on each property to reevaluate, but we do update our values for all properties as of January 1 of each year. So that is the effective date evaluation that we're always looking at. So even if you're looking at, you know, homes that sell in middle of this year, we're not really looking at that data until the following January 1. So we always lag. So that's when you'll see some of this data that I'll show with value trends. Keep in mind, it's usually always lagging by a year, because that data hits and gets published as of that following January 1. So when we do comparable sales, we're using data from effectively almost a year, could be as much as a year old. So getting into Amendment 1, it is called the third homestead exemption because it's the third time they've proposed putting a 25,000 homestead exemption on the ballot. But the history of homestead goes all the way back to 1934. We'll get into that. Like I said, Amendment 2 we'll touch on, but that's related to the 10% non-homestead cap that is due to sunset at the end of this year. So that is an important one as well. So 1 and 2 are the two that affect the tax base within Pinellas County and throughout the entire state. So a lot of people ask, why is Amendment 1 even on the ballot? Where did it come from? And it was a blessing from our legislature that decided that we needed more homestead exemption. As a property appraiser, I'm statutorily about being fair and equitable, so I'm not a huge fan of putting handcuffs on local government funding, because I know values can go up. We've been fortunate in the last few years. We're on an upward trend, which is good, but values can also go down. I've lived through 3 market cycles myself in the real estate arena, so I've watched, you know, the rewards and the battering that can occur in a down cycle. So So at the state level, they determined that this was an important thing to put on the ballot to let everyone decide, but it really is only going to have an effect at the local level. So here's a brief summary of the history of homestead exemption. You can see it goes all the way back to 1934, but at that time, $5,000 was probably the majority of the value of people's homes, but obviously they didn't have the level of services we're talking about today. First homestead of 25 occurred in 1980. Then we had the Save Our Homes Amendment in the 90s, which that was big. That's when you look at some slides later, you're going to see a big gap between market value and taxable value. That gap is largely a result of our caps and our exemptions. And the Save Our Homes Amendment put that 3% maximum Save Our Homes cap on the homesteaded properties that has really held down taxable value through the years. Then in 2008, we got another 25,000. That was the second homestead, the second 25. And now we have the proposed third, which would, if voted in November, would take effect as of 2019. But it's not as simple as just adding 325s together. It's not just $75,000 off of whatever your value is. First of all, it's not your market value, it's your assessed value. Those things are very different. Your assessed value is the value that is capped by that Save Our Homes cap. So first of all, you have to be a homestead. Second, it's based on assessed value, which can be very different than your market value, especially if you've been in your home for, say, a decade or more. We see these market resets when a homesteader sells. As of the next January 1, that Save Our Homes cap comes off. They reset to full market value, and then they can apply for homestead, and then they start to receive the benefit of the cap as the market continues to move. The market declines. When the market hits wherever that assessed value is, they ride down together in a falling market, but then in a rising market, they can separate, and that assessed value does not increase at the same rate. It's capped at 3% or CPI, the Consumer Price Index, whichever is less. So we haven't even hit 3% since back in 2012. So we'll show you some info on that. So, but the way the value works, the 75,000 of homestead exemption is banded. So the first homestead's easy, 0 to 25,000 of assessed value, dollar for dollar, your first 25,000, completely exempt from all millages, including schools. But then you leap a band of 25,000 where there are no exemptions to get to the second. So the second starts in the band of value from $50,000 to $75,000 of assessed value. That applies to all millages except for the schools. Schools are excluded from that. So people in that value range are still paying for schools. Now, for example, if you have a property, say it's a senior condo, and on top of the world, it's assessed for $60,000. Making up numbers. So they would get the benefit of this. They get the first 25, so they have 25, but they only get $10,000 of this one, the difference between 50 and 60,000. So they would have a $35,000 homestead exemption. They would not receive the full 50 of these two combined unless their assessed value hit 75,000. So it moves dollar for dollar through that range. The proposed third, we leap another 25,000 with no exemption. The band of 100 to 125,000. So now you have to exceed 100,000 of assessed before you start to receive any partial benefit of third homestead. You have to hit 125 to receive what we call full benefit. Again, this band is similar to the second band, applies to all millages except schools. So the big thing to keep in mind is that you can't just add them up, deduct them off. You really need your assessed value needs to hit 125 before you're going to see that any full benefit from that. So our fear was that a lot of people are going to think they're automatically going to qualify. A lot of them are going to be seniors. They might even, their value of their property might be $200,000 or even more. But then when you actually look at their assessed value, it can be dramatically lower. And really that difference between your assessed value and your just market value, that is a giant exemption. That's the other thing people forget about. that Save Our Homes cap creates a huge exemption for people, and that applies to all millages, including schools. So that's one reason why I don't really think the third homestead was necessary, because so many people are benefiting from that big cap differential. And that's what we call the difference between these two is called the cap differential. And if you've heard the term portability, which went into effect back in 2008, that's when basically the legislature passed that so that you could essentially take that difference between these two figures. When you look at your trim notice or look on our website, the difference between those two figures can be carried to your next homesteaded property. So that's an exemption that you can carry with you. So if the difference between these two is $100,000, you carry that over as long as your value is equal or greater to the property that you were leaving. If you move down, downsize your property, then it's just prorated down on a pro rata basis. You still get to carry it, but it'll be prorated down. So, yes.
So from what you've said so far, if the homestead exemptions and other policies that are in place that act like exemptions, it really favors people who have been in their homes a long time, or favors people who are already Florida residents who then move.
Correct. Yes. The longer you've been in your home, the sooner you establish a homestead, likely the better off you are as far as being protected by that Save Our Homes cap. Not always the case. Some of it depends on the market area, the property you bought. If we have some areas where there just hasn't been as much value growth as others, and then other areas where you have a staggering amount of value growth. So this just shows that history of CPI. Like we said, the Save Our Homes cap caps you at 3% per year, or CPI, whichever is lower. 2018, 2.1. It's been 2.1 for the last 2 years. You can see it goes back to 2012 since we've hit 3%. We had several years at under 1%. So a lot of people forget about that. They think they're automatically moving at 3% with their assessed values, and they're not. Now that doesn't take into account what their millage rates are. So if your taxing authority dials your millage rate up, then yes, you could certainly exceed 3%. But if they go to the rollback rate, and if they went to the rollback rate, you would be in line with this. So what is a homestead really worth? We've kind of talked about this. I mentioned the fact that really the hidden exemption that people forget about is that Save Our Homes cap and that differential, and that's a huge one. But if you take just the existing first and second, the 225s that total to 50, that equates to about $500 to $800 of savings to your average homesteader. And the reason for the difference is a function of which taxing district you live in. So that's what creates that range. Same here with the proposed third. You're going to be somewhere an additional savings of about $200 to $400, again, depending on what taxing district you're in. So how do our homesteaders versus our non-homesteaders break down? Well, you can see we're in the neighborhood of about 400,000 residential properties. Almost 60% are homesteaded. This is countywide versus our 40% non-homestead. So let's look at eligibility of those homesteaders. Well, everybody sees some form of a benefit that's homesteaded from that first band, because it starts at basically $1. Starts moving. And just so you know, each of these bands are a function of, if you at least pierce that band and start and get at least $1 benefit from it, you're on this blue bar. So it doesn't mean you get full benefit. So eligibility at second homestead, 87% of our homesteaders are seeing at least $1 benefit there. When you get out to third, it falls down to 56%. Now when you bring in all residential, now this is homesteaders and non-homesteaders, so it's all of our residential property owners. You get out the third homestead, it falls to a third. That would see any benefit. So here it is visually on a map. The green represents full benefit, so you're breaking the 125,000. you're hitting that figure. If you're yellow, you're somewhere in that 100 to 125,000 of assessed value range. And if you're under 100,000, you're in the red because you're not receiving any benefit from third. So what we did over here is we stripped away the green and the yellows just so you could just see the no benefit, because it gets a little muddy over here on the heat map. And anybody venture a guess where that is? Looks like the red spot on Jupiter. That is on top of the world. Right, because we've got about 5,000 units there. I think only a handful of them would see any benefit.
I wonder if they know.
And this data is actually, we married this data with the supervisor of elections data. So this is actually by voter, not just by homesteader. So we actually matched it up to make it a little more meaningful. This is a statewide vote, so we also wanted to look at how these figures break down at a state level as opposed to Pinellas County. You can see those that do not benefit in Pinellas County is around the 45% number, not too far off of where it is statewide. And if you break it down into tax dollars, so if we took, and this is all hypothetical because we're running against our 2018 preliminary values, which were generated as of July 1, and we're using the 2017 final millage rates. So we have a little bit of a hybrid going on. So this is assuming no change of millage rates from last year. And this that shows hypothetically what would have cut out of the budget, essentially. So this is countywide. This is unincorporated all your municipalities, all your special districts. So about 41 million. But keep in mind that doesn't take into consideration, you got to think about taxable value growth too. So we're going to break that down a little bit as well. Here it is at the municipal level. Obviously, oh, I'm sorry, no, this is county. I'm like, that's not St. Pete's number, that's way too big. So that's your general fund with the county, EMS, and the MSTUs. When you get down to the municipal level, St. Pete is obviously our largest city. They're going to see the largest impact there. So about 4.6. Clearwater's our second largest, and they're at almost 1.7. But we have some good news because values have been going in a positive direction for the last several years. So taxable value growth countywide for 2018 is approximately 8%. So that's pretty healthy when it comes down to the taxable value growth side. The orange bars represent taxable value. The blue bars represent just market value. That difference, as we talked about earlier, that's a function of your caps and your exemptions.
Right.
That's what creates that difference. So taxable, we're at about $79 billion there. When you bring on new construction, and actually we're updating this number because this number went up about 100 million recently because of a very large project. So we're at pushing almost $1 billion of new construction in 2018, which is good because that's all new taxable revenue. That's not increasing anybody else's tax dollars. That is new, essentially new inventory coming into Pinellas County and creating additional revenue. Obviously, we have to support that new construction with new services.
So new construction is a new number each year. The others are carried forward, right?
Correct. The others are essentially cumulative numbers, but then they can go up or down.
I understand.
Yes. Yeah, new construction is a fresh number every year.
Right, okay.
Yep. And just, well, we'll get into here in a second. So let's look at, this is a hypothetical again, because third homestead doesn't exist for 2018, but we're going to use 2018 values. This is all your municipalities, all 24 of them. And just to show you the difference of how different taxing authorities are impacted as a result if third homestead existed. I'm going to put this line on because that helps. It probably confuses you right now, but it's going to help, trust me. Basically, what we're looking at, the blue bars are taxable value growth, the orange are the impact of the third homestead, so the gray line is the net. So blue minus orange is gray. Okay, so this shows you your net impact. So for example, Bel Air Shore, our smallest taxing authority or district, they exceeded 11% of taxable value growth. Those are all big homes on the Gulf. There were a couple of sales that resulted in a cap reset, and boom, their taxable value growth jumped way up because of that. And they don't have a whole lot of homesteaders, so you can see they're under 1% there. So basically no impact whatsoever to that particular taxing district. But then you take Safety Harbor, and you can see the third homestead impact would have exceeded their taxable value growth. So they actually would have went below the line. Because in Safety Harbor, almost everybody's homesteaded. You have a high percentage there of homesteaders. Plus, they are one of the few that actually has the senior exemption on top of that, which sits on top of their municipal taxes.
So someone like Safety Harbor will get significantly less revenue to their municipality because of this, is that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
This is the effect on the municipality.
Yeah.
Basically, if this would have happened for this year, they would have had, I mean, let's call that's roughly a net wash almost. So they would have had no new funds. They basically would have flatlined from last year to this year, despite taxable value growth of over 7%. It basically would have wiped out that taxable value growth.
So that isn't that it would have gone to no income. It would have stayed the same.
Correct. It
Despite
didn't-
inflation.
It wouldn't have
and
taken
residents.
away from
Right.
what they already had. It just
Understand.
would have wiped them out.
Understand.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Now, these are the districts that get hit the hardest. These are your fire districts. They're smaller districts. They're not like a city with multiple, essentially, buckets of funds to be able to shift around to different departments as needed. So you can see when you overlay the net line there, we have many going below the line to the tune of pushing 2 to 3%. Those are the ones you're going to see the biggest potential issues with. That's where you could potentially have some service impacts in some of those districts. So I wanted to give you those examples because it lets you see how different it can be from authority to authority. So let's look at PSTA. Figure we might as well come back home, right?
Thank you.
So now keep in mind, this is value growth. This is over and above where you were last year. So on top of that, so you're looking at about taxable value growth for 18 that affects you guys is about 5.26 billion, which equates to about that much in tax dollars, almost $4 million, about 8.4% growth. So that's what you all are going to see this year. But if third homestead existed this year, it would have more than cut that in half. So you still would have grown, you still would have had new revenue, but not to the same tune. You would have had 1.75 instead of almost 4. But then next year, we don't know what taxable value growth is going to be. It's conceivable it could be flat. It's conceivable something could happen and the market could turn. I have concerns about other things within Pinellas County, flood insurance concerns, things that can impact values and impact our tax base. So that's why we have to be sensitive to all these things, and we don't want to, when it's unnecessary, we don't want to put handcuffs on what our local leaders can do to create funding that is needed. Any questions on that slide?
Well, that's the increase, the difference in the increase. And
Correct.
so we would have had that much less, but, so next year we could hypothetically get less, that much less than we would.
Correct. Now, this is based on, that was using the same millage rate as 2017. So I didn't, and you're holding the same, okay. Yeah, I mean, if you went to the rollback rate, this would be a different scenario, so. So I know this slide's a little busy, so I'll explain it to you. But, so we were concerned about people going to the polls and thinking, okay, I'm homesteaded, they're increasing homestead exemption to $75,000, and hey, bring it on, you know, I'm all for saving a buck. So, but what we didn't want to happen was them to go and vote for it, then find out after the fact, well, you don't even qualify for it, or, you know, maybe you're gonna get a couple dollars for it because you barely penetrate that $100,000 band with your assessed value. You know, so I'm all about trying to inform people up front, keep the torches and pitchforks away from the front of my office is always a good thing. So I said, why don't we should be able to build a tool that we can put out there for citizens, not only Pinellas-wide, but statewide. So I approached the Property Appraisers Association of Florida, and they agreed to help sponsor it. So I built it out in our office, and then I gained adoption so far of 60 of our 67 counties. It is online, has been online since March of this year. We're getting about 4,500 runs of it weekly, and so it's out there. People are using it all over the state right now. So we know a lot of people run it, and they're surprised when they see see a zero that they don't benefit. And then other people are, everybody's got their own motivation. So some people will do anything to save $300, and other people are running it and saying, is it really worth it for me to save that $300? Yes.
Well, the other question is, the estimator of what people will save is also, I wish there were a way of showing what people might lose, because as we're talking about, we obviously care as PSTA riders that we have better ridership. And I think people may not realize that that $300 that you think you're going to save or you're not going to save may mean that you're not going to have good fire district support.
Right.
And I always was an estimator of what kind of losses you would see.
I know, and that would be nice, but that would be almost impossible to pull off statewide because of what I showed you earlier with all the different, you take the different municipalities and, each taxing authority is going to be impacted in a different way. And then, of course, we got millage rates that are, moving target. And to pull all that, I mean, we could have built it in Pinellas, but even then, it would have been tough. But to do it statewide would have almost been impossible. So we wanted it to be very simple, where people could just enter their address and run it. Yes, sir.
Just going to ask about the millage rates. It's, well, this assumes that they're unchanged. Like, how does the process work for increasing the millage rates, and would you expect that would happen and offset some of this? Or?
It could happen with some authorities, but you have to remember that there are certain authorities that are capped. A lot of your fire, yes, the PSTA is one of them. So you all couldn't dial up the millage rate to offset any of those potential losses. A lot of your fire districts are that way. They're already up against the cap. A lot of your cities still have some room, so they could move it. But then there may be political pressures, things like that may prevent them from wanting to move those millage rates. So you've got different dynamics going on throughout the county.
Can we ask, is PSTA still below its maximum millage?
We are at our cap.
Right, okay, so we had.
Which is 0.75.
Right.
So if you have anybody that wants to run it, particularly people that are, our seniors or people that have been homesteaders for a long time, really good for them to run this. They can find it right on our homepage, that link right there. We'll take them straight in, 3hxestimator.org, so they can drive right to it, If they drive in through our front door, it will already be populated with Pinellas as the county, so then all they have to do is enter their address. And then if they're, oh, there's where it is. If they've already pulled up their parcel on our website, you can actually get to it down here in the tax information box. It will say check estimated third homestead exemption benefit, and they can run it right there, and they don't even have to enter their address again. It'll actually just pull the result. So the result, if you're entering your address, it's just a matter of typing it in. So this one's in Treasure Island. It's an example of somebody that exceeds the 125,000 or hits the 125 of assessed, so they get 100% of the full benefit of that 25,000. So $271 in that tax district. Here's an example in St. Pete, only 23% benefit, so under $100. So it gives you a different result based on your situation. Here's an example of somebody is assessed below that 100,000, and it tells them why, and then obviously they get a 0. Same thing if they try and run a non-homesteaded property. So, obviously, a yes vote places that additional 25,000 into the Constitution. It would benefit homesteaders, but at the same time, it may not benefit them, and could be loss of service. Might make their neighbors that are non-homesteaded that much angrier at them, because now you've essentially shifted some of that burden over. Now your non-homesteaded neighbors are paying a higher percentage of the overall tax burden. A no vote maintains status quo with the existing 50,000 of homestead and the Samer Homes cap, which has been in place since 2008. So we'll jump to Amendment 2 here in a second, but any other Amendment 1 related questions?
If I can, there's that old joke about don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the man behind the tree.
Yeah.
You just said about we're not changing, we're just picking whose pocket this is coming from, and there's some hope that cities aren't being careful enough. I'm new at this. A non-homestead is either a snowbird, someone who's renting out the home, or so if I'm renting my home to someone, the renter is losing, if you will, the homestead exemption, and their rent is going to be higher. Is that
Potentially, yes.
or
Yeah.
I'm losing money on it?
You're actually getting into what Amendment 2 is about.
Okay, great. I'll be quiet.
So that's
Thank you.
great. So that's a
I
great
have a
segue.
question. I have a question. What
Yes.
percentage voted yes on the previous 2 amendments?
On Amendment 2,
On Amendment 1 back in 2008?
right, I think
Do we
at
know?
that time it was Amendment 10, I think is what it was.
But was it
Like
like,
a high percentage?
was it a,
It wasn't giant. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it needs over 60%, and I think it was in the 60s. I don't think it went,
like 80-20 or?
No, I don't think it did. Now, it had more moving parts to it because it had portability, it had additional homestead, and it had the 10% cap. I think those were all rolled into one. They might have been 2 different amendments, but they might have been rolled into one. I actually can't recall. Yes, sir.
You had a number there for Pinellas County that a third of the homes were eligible for the third exemption. Do you have a sense of what that is for the state of Florida?
It is, our data there is not as accurate as I would like to be, but it is higher overall, but it's still not a giant number. It's in the, I think it's around 40% when you take in all the stuff.
So the vast majority of homeowners are not going to benefit from.
Correct. 'Cause we're-
And anybody who's not a homeowner clearly has a risk of not benefiting when services get cut.
Right.
So the passage of it is basically a lack of understanding on the voter standpoint. If over 60% of people, when you take into account renters.
Well, it gets more complicated than that because a lot of your non-homesteaders are not necessarily voters, too. So you have to bring that into account. So, and that's why we did that one heat map that actually merged homestead data with voter data, so that we could get a better representation. So that gets trickier at a statewide level. You almost have to take SOE data statewide and merge that all together to really see where that shakes out.
But it doesn't, just thinking about it, it's not approaching 60% logically.
I don't think so.
Most likely under 50%.
It's benefiting the people that have high-value homes.
I understand, I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
that's,
Yeah, no, I was.
But really, on a high-value home, a $25,000 exemption
Yeah.
isn't that much, really. Again, it's really more about that Save Our Homes cap is the key. Okay, so jumping back into your question a little bit. So Amendment 2 is the proposed 10% cap repeal, because you're basically repealing the sunsetting of this. So it's like a repeal of the repeal. It gets confusing. That's why it's easier just to look at it this way. If you vote yes on it, it continues it into perpetuity. If you vote no, the 10% cap goes away. What the 10% cap does right now is like the Save Our Homes cap, but it's for all non-homesteaded property. So the assessed value cannot increase more than 10% year over year for any non-homesteaded property. Now, non-homesteaded property means anything that's not homesteaded. I don't care if it's vacant land, a second home, commercial office building, a shopping center, an apartment building. It doesn't matter what it is. It's everything else that does not have a homestead. So that touches a lot of properties. That's over 250,000 properties in Pinellas County. So when you
And how long ago did this come into play?
2008, so 10 years ago. So it is set to sunset basically the end of the year. And this is one that I would more strongly advocate for a yes vote, because to me, if it goes away, you've only increased that inequity between your homesteaders and non-homesteaders that much more. Because now all of those that are benefiting from that 10% cap, that resets the market. So those people, boom, can get a jump up. Now, what that would do, that's going to give revenue back, but you're going to have a lot of unhappy property owners. And ultimately, I think it could backfire within the real estate market, that it's not really a good long-run play for the state of Florida to treat non-homesteaders in that manner, when you've got homesteaders protected and all of a sudden the non-homesteaders have absolutely no protection. Yes, sir.
Do you have the information on what those rates have been increasing generally across the county?
It's really a function of the market value movement.
I understand, but is there, has it been, if we're looking at Pinellas County, if we broke it down by municipality, is it 3% one year, 8% another, then capped at 10? What have those rates been changing year over year?
I really can't do it, because you have so many different property types involved. You'll be out in one beach town and it's all single family. It might be a small little single family area, and then you'll move down the road and now you're in a beach town that has a lot of commercial and a lot of tourism. So those numbers can swing incredibly. It could be from like 2% in one area, and down the street it could be almost 20%. So really haven't ran that as far as.
So there's no way to know whether we've been hitting that cap realistically on a regular.
No, and there are properties that don't. The ones that have traded more recently won't be at the cap yet. But if they have traded, say, 5+ years ago, they could easily be banging against that cap, and they could be saving something.
Is it fair to say that it affects more commercial property than
Absolutely.
residential?
Yes, I would say so, because commercial generally has the ability to swing at a greater, when the market gets good, and certain property types, especially like multifamily rental apartments, the market's been really hot for those. Been a lot of trading of those. Values have jumped up immensely on those properties. So we've seen where some of those increases have hit more than 20% in a year.
So, but there is no inequity then between commercial properties, right? So you were talking about an inequity between the residential, the homesteaded versus non-homesteaded residential, but all commercial properties are the same. So, you know, everyone's going up and down on their tax rates.
Correct.
Based on the value. So
Based on what
it's
their
a
value is.
prevailing market rate that is driving.
Correct. They only get, you know, unless they exceed 10%, then they stop at that 10%.
No.
But
Just a
this
couple more
gentleman back
questions
here-
and-
No,
yes, just a couple
he
more
answered my
questions.
question. I
Okay.
was just looking at an annual basis versus total.
Okay.
On that, that's an annual basis.
Correct.
The cap would be at 10%.
Yes. Yep.
Sorry, and a couple more questions, because we do need to move forward. We have another meeting coming after this, so.
Sure.
Is the wording going to be misleading on the ballot?
Yes, it would be confusing.
I
It
think
is gonna be
it's fine.
confusing. So basically, we should all try to be, like, you know, speak to everyone that we know.
Right.
Is there any media going on to better inform the voting public about this?
Pinellas County is rolling out their marketing effort. Our office worked with them, providing them a lot of data and also giving them some advice, making sure some of their language was right between, you know, assessed value and market value and getting all those things right. So we worked together in that. One of my deputies is actually, I appointed him to the marketing team to work with them. So they're getting ready to roll that out. They've been working with all the PIOs around the Tampa Bay area and sharing that information with them. So you should see some resources come out on the Pinellas County website. I know if you were to reach out to Pinellas County Marketing, they have presentations already built. They've got a speakers bureau going, and they're basically equipping different speakers to go out and educate the public on this.
Thank you very much for coming
Yeah,
and
thank
speaking
you.
with us. It was a
You're
lot of
welcome.
fun.
I can actually have questions, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
And I was
Yes,
also
go ahead.
under the impression that with Robert's Rules of Order, we're supposed to wait till the end of the
Oh, I'm
presentation to
sorry.
ask
Yes, yes,
questions,
you
so
did.
like,
No, you're
I've been
right,
kind
I
of holding
did.
off on
Yes,
asking
absolutely.
questions, and
Go
then,
ahead.
one thing I have is, Amendment 2, was this also, by the state legislature, or was this the CRC?
No, it was, well, no. This was put on in 2008, and it was set to
Okay,
sunset
all right.
in 10 years. So this is just, they actually had to the legislature decided to put a new bill or a new constitutional amendment on to try and continue it, to let the public decide, or else it would have just gone away. If they wouldn't have put something out there for us to vote on, it would have just died, and the cap would have disappeared.
Okay, and another question is, so what year for Amendment 1, which taxable assessed value year would be used for that? Would that be 2019, or would that be 2018?
19.
That's it.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all very much, and feel free to use our office as a resource if you ever need to reach out, get any data, have any other questions. We're going to publish some additional information on our homepage related to Amendment 1 and 2. We're trying to, obviously take a non-advocacy position and just put some data out there so people can kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and understand more about what's going on. Please feel free to share the estimator, and then another tool you may want to check out if you have family members, or if you yourself are looking at buying a new home. We actually have a brand new tax estimator on our site too that will allow you to run what your estimated taxes might look like, because again of that reset when you cross that January 1 after a new sale. And we had a lot of issues with the way the market has moved, and new buyers coming in after January 1, and they get a letter that their escrow is short by $3,000 or $4,000, and they show up, very upset because their title agent didn't tell them, their broker didn't tell them, those types of things, and they're relying on, what the prior owner's taxes were, and they were there for 20 years plus. We've seen, it can double, triple, even quadruple, depending on what taxing district they're in. So we built that tool. I'm not going to go through it because I know you guys are busy, but it's right on our website. Well, right there, you can run it. And again, it will also run from the parcel record page down at the bottom in that tax box where I showed you earlier with the estimator. You can, for the third homestead estimator, you can also run the tax estimator there. So great tool for your new homeowners. And it works for portability too. So if you're moving from your existing homestead to another, it'll handle your report as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. to begin the main portion of our meeting now. And I wanted to, again, say there's another meeting following our meeting downstairs, which will be about the service changes, and so I'm trying to rush things through a little more quickly as a result of it. First is public comment. Is there anyone? Okay, good. All right. Then the next is just quickly my chair's report. I always talk about what happened at the last board meeting. The last board meeting was a shorter board meeting. The important thing was the very beginning of it. We did present our new TRAC Star Award program to the board, and I believe it was very well received by our board. And in fact, what happened with that since our meeting, as I think a lot of you have already seen, the videos that were out there with Maine News 9, and then also a wonderful video that was put together from Ephraim here at PSTA, really tells the story very well. Beyond our board, we also presented the award then at Baltimore's City Council meeting, and it was interesting because my husband actually went with me to that meeting, and he said they were so happy. He said, as I was watching the faces of the people, they were so proud of having won that award, and I've talked with some other people from other municipalities and said, we ought to be able to do something like that. So again, keep thinking of ideas for that from our standpoint. The other information, again, if you want to just watch the board meeting on the video on the website. But just a couple of there was a conversation by Debbie Leos about the effective millage rate, retaining our current millage rate money for PSTA, and then talked about what PSTA is doing to control medical costs among the employees, which I thought was very good and very well thought through. And then finally a contract for the state legislative government affairs provider. And so it was just interesting information. And then the one other thing I had, or did you have anything you wanted to add about that? No, okay. And then one other thing I wanted to say from our standpoint, I wanted us to congratulate Derek, is now a full voting member of our committee because of the changes to our mid-county. Okay, so that's it for my comments. Now, Dave, do you want to talk about Forward Pinellas?
Again, it's the summer, so the Pinellas Forward does not meet during July or August. However, tomorrow, the T-BARTA meeting will be held, so I'll be there representing us sort of informally.
Okay. Okay. Now, the first action item we have is the approval of our meeting minutes. Have all of you had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any comments, changes, corrections? If there are no changes, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I make that motion.
A second? Elizabeth, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one other thing. We have our board member, Josh Schulman, is visiting us again today. Thank you very much for attending, Mr. Schulman. Okay. The other action item we have on our agenda is the October service change information from Bob Lasher. And so,
thank you. I'm going to go over some changes that we're proposing for October. Most of you know we do this 3 times a year, February, June, and October. We're always trying to update our routes and see what we can do and the changes we can make. As you might have heard, we might be preparing for some different finances in the future. And some things we've been looking at, and by the way, what's coming up next is a public hearing on some of this. And I'll start off with, we're going to be working with the 97, 98, and the 52. And this sounds a lot bigger than it is. Really what we're going to be doing is renaming the 97 and the 98, folding it into the 52. Most of you know the 52 now runs Park Street along East Bay, West Bay, down to Grand Central. That's along 49th. If you don't take the 97 and 98, the 98 covers the north portion of that during rush hour. So in the morning, it's pretty much a one-way shot coming down from Park Street through Carillon, ending at the courthouse. That runs 3 times in the morning. I'll go through these in a little bit. And then the 97 is at the lower end. I'll take you through that as well. One of the other things we want to do is we want to get a little more consistency in the 52 schedule. If any of you looked at it, we have anywhere from 20-minute headways to 45-minute, some 20, 30, 40. So we want to make that a nice, clean 30-minute headways along the routes. That's also what we're going to be doing here. As I mentioned, the 98, this covers the northern part of it. 3 runs in the morning going from Park Street down through Carillon, ending up at the courthouse, pretty much overlapping the entire 52 route. The 97 is on the bottom end of it, from downtown St. Petersburg. It's pretty much coming up north, and it also goes up to the courthouse as well. A few more times, though. That's actually running 4 times in the morning and 4 times in the evening. It runs a little bit more than the 98, but other than the portion here from St. Petersburg to Grand Central, it's overlapping the 52. So what the proposal is we want to bring these together, and we will be, because we have so much redundancy between Grand Central and downtown, because you've got the Central Avenue trolley, you've got the 18, you've got the 14, depending on where you want to go, you can also take the Route 5. We're going to take this section out of what would be the 97, and then we're going to overlap it, fold it in, and call it the 52LX, which is a working name right now, but that's Limited Express. So we'll be looking at consistent headways, 30 minutes from 5:30 in the morning to 11:30. With this LX, folding it in, we'll have 15-minute frequency during rush hours.
Excellent.
And so I don't alarm anybody, because it's limited stop, don't think it's too limited. By limited, we mean the stops are going to be no closer than half a mile. Because right now, a lot of them are a quarter of a mile, a lot of stopping. So we want to just cut down the stops. So you'll have, excuse me, some good options going up and down along this 52 route. And then the Carillon service will be every 30 minutes between 6:40 and 8:30 in the morning, very similar to what we have now, and 3:40 to 5:30 p.m. every afternoon, also very similar to what we have now. There will be some slight change. The 52, and then I guess it's not exactly right on the map, right here, the LX will miss that little segment of 49th because it's going to go through Carillon, come by here. And another benefit is that right now, if you ride the 52, it doesn't come in here on the weekends. Now it'll come in here and the Pinellas Park Transit Center right here on every run. These are comments we've gotten over the years. People say, make it consistent, bring them in there. So this is an opportunity to do that. And the service that we get from here from the 97, that's what we're doing with it. That allows us to make it more consistent along the 52. So we're kind of just shifting that service. I guess I got ahead of myself. But really, here's what we're looking at. The 30-minute service, every trip to the lay-by in here. Saturday morning, 5 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. with 30 minutes again, everything coming into the lay-by. And Sunday as well, not quite as much service, 7 a.m., but they will start serving the lay-by, which is important because now we're linking with the 4 and the 59 at that lay-by. So that's a very important link. So these are some of the reasons why we wanted to do that. This is, by the way, after this is a public hearing. What you just saw, this is the subject of the public hearing. So unless if you don't want to make a comment on it, then you're no obligation to come downstairs at 6 o'clock. Also in the service change, we're going to be changing the looper, downtown looper we're working on. And you may have heard, this is where our new electric buses will be deployed. One of them is now down in the yard. I still haven't seen it.
Wow.
I've got to get down there and see it, but I've heard a lot of neat things about it. And there's some minor changes. What I really like is that we're going to bring it over into Bayfront and All Children's.
Good.
The medical centers. Still going to go to the Dolly during Dolly hours. And you see a few changes up in the north end. It's not going to be coming down along Beach like it is currently, which is kind of a nightmare. A lot of cars parked there. It's a tough area. And we'll also bring it over closer so it serves the Mahaffey on the north end. I think that's going to be really neat. So this is something that'll be coming up. Some minor changes, but I think they're going to be neat, especially when we get the electric buses on it. We're pretty excited about that. Also, the surveys that were done down there found that almost all of the riders in the Looper now are commuters. I'm not commuters, are tourists.
Right.
We are going to start it early enough, so now with the services we have downtown, people can use this when they commute. It'll be early enough so it can be part of a daily commute as opposed, you start at 10 in the morning right now, you're not gonna get people down there, for the most part, using it when they're commuting. So this is something I'm really eager to see, because it's a whole new market we're opening up for this service. Some of the other changes, a little more minor, like this 16, we're just gonna depart at 5 minutes earlier, so it better connects with the 100 exit gateway. The 20 right now runs along 2nd Street North in downtown St. Pete. We're gonna move that back to 3rd and 4th Street for a few blocks, moving it north and south there, probably pick up better ridership. We're gonna do the same with the 23. We moved that along, it's to 16, just between 22nd Avenue now south and 7th Avenue a couple of years ago, and it wasn't working out so well, and we've had some requests to move it back, so that's what we're gonna do with the 23. We're just gonna put it back along MLK. The 66, that's the limited run from Tarpon Springs, goes through Clearwater Fundamental and then Park Street and then down to Morton Plant Meats, but we're not getting any ridership south of Park Street, so we're gonna just terminate it at Park Street. The beach trolley, we're moving a time point. We've got that new transit center, so instead of having the time point at Beach Walk, we're gonna put it at that nice new transit center out on the beach. Makes a lot of sense. We gotta pull out there as well. And then, as I mentioned, the route adjustments. So these are what we're proposing coming up for our service change, which will be October 7th. So, any questions, comments?
Richard?
Yes,
I read this ahead of time. I love all of this. This is
Oh,
really
thank
great
you.
stuff. Thanks, Bob.
I appreciate it. I'll put that into public comment.
I'll go do it myself.
For the hearings, we don't usually get comments like that.
We're all well thought out.
But thank you. Yes?
I've never ridden the Looper. Does that also have an info line stop so you can find out when it's coming?
That's a really good question. Do they have a customer service staff or?
They do have an operations staff, but I don't think they have the same level of customer service that we do and the availability of folks. But we are putting some new technology on their vehicles, so we'll put them into our CAD AVL systems, our real-time system, and we'll be installing some automatic passenger counters on their vehicles. So they will more seamlessly integrate with the PSTA system.
What
So
are their
if you called into our customer service, they'd be able to tell you where the bus is, they'd be able to see that.
It's like we can locate them now.
Can you?
Yeah.
What are their vehicles? Are
They're trolley vehicles, they're,
Red and yellow.
I think they're 35-foot.
I think he's got a few
gas.
shorter ones too.
So are they the same kind of disability access as what like the Jolly Trolley has, or is it the kind of access that a regular bus does with the new van?
No, I think they're similar to the Jolly Trolley. But the new electric buses that will be running on it will be like our buses.
Good.
So you'll have much better access. Any other questions? Yes.
What is downtown Looper? Is it, if I read correctly, is it going to go to down by the Dolly Museum and also
Yes.
go into the Mojave Theater? So it's going to go to like the garage.
It'll go. It's not. I don't know if it's going to go through the garage anymore. It's going to move around the Dolly when it's open. It's not going to. If it's closed, it's not. And then it's just short of the Mahaffey up here. Should turn a block away from that, yeah.
Mojave's right there by the Dolly
You said the
Museum.
Palladium up there.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
So-
Yeah. the Mahaffey's
So it'll be
here.
going right to the
But it'll
parking
be
garage
going
almost.
right by the Mahaffey. The current route's going through the garage. This
Yeah.
will go by it.
And people can park and ride there if they wanted to, or can they go somewhere else?
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to bill it as a park and ride.
Well,
They charge for parking there, so.
Yeah.
I don't think
you
you
charge
should.
for parking there, people.
I suppose I suppose, yeah, they could. But if it's public parking, it's charged. I'm not sure how they would handle it on an event tonight, but yeah.
So just to augment Bob's answer, we are pulling it out of the parking garage. So right now, the Looper goes through the Happy parking garage.
Yeah.
We no longer do that because it really keeps the route from staying on time.
Okay.
And so by taking it down Dolly Boulevard, there is a turnaround there. We're not showing the turnaround, but we'll go down Dan Weldon Way and then come back. But that back side of the Dolly, so you'll have access to the Dolly through the rear entrance there.
And here's the garage, so we'll be skirting it, so.
Right.
it
So
won't
you'll
be
have,
too
and
far a
then
walk.
the city is building a pedestrian pathway from First Street to the Mahaffey. So that's how the pedestrian access will be to the Mahaffey. But we've been working with the Dolly and the Mahaffey on this.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions? I have one other change that's coming. One that I'm most excited about. On our trolley routes, our drivers are now going to have Aloha style shirts. I have already put my order in. I personally love them, but you know, with the Aloha style shirts, some people think they're a little gaudy, but since the day I started here, I've been asking for them, so I'm really excited.
So one more thing, the new Looper 2.0 will be free.
Okay.
That's right.
Really?
God,
Oh, for all time, not just introduction?
yeah.
It'll be.
Downtown Looper's gonna be
Promoting it is free, and we'll be working with the St. Pete Downtown Partnership on a car-free living campaign. So with all the changes in downtown, with more residential and more employment, we really think this is the opportunity for people to, when they live in downtown, to park their car on Friday night and not get in it until Monday morning. And if they live and work downtown, they won't have to own a car at all because all their transportation needs will be met.
And when does it start?
October 7th.
Great.
Well, we'll have ribbon cuttings, we've got the electric buses, there'll be a lot of fanfare.
So please mark down the date of October 3rd.
That's right, October 3rd is the ribbon cutting for the
Will
buses.
be our event for the service.
Wonderful. Okay, if there are no other questions, this is an action item, so I think we need to vote on
Yes,
our
recommending it to the
approval
board.
to recommend to the board that we support the recommended changes.
It would just, Mark sent me an email, and if you don't mind, I'll just let you all
Okay.
know what his comments were. He asked if there was any thought being given to cut the Route 52 in half, as done with the 19 and the 59. We did consider that, mostly because this is a very long route, but we really take our rider travel patterns seriously, and there's wasn't a clear place to have that break happen. So instead of doing that, we decided to try the 52 LX as a way to see if we could provide better service on the corridor. His other comment is it possible for the new 52 LX to make limited stops as it travels from Grand Central to Carillon? I think Bob answered that question with half-mile consolidated stops. So just to let you know that he was paying attention.
Great, no.
He was.
Well, it's always wonderful, even when people can't be attending the meetings, it is so nice when people, being the geeks that we all are, that people still be involved. That's great, thank you. Okay, back to that, this is an action item, and what I'm looking for is a motion to.
I would love to give the motion on this one. This looks great.
Motion to approve the recommendations made by.
Absolutely, to pass it to the board.
Yes, and Elizabeth's seconding.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
All right,
Go for
thank
it.
you.
And like Bob was saying, that the meeting downstairs at 6 o'clock will be to talk about this as well. So if any of you have interest in attending the public meeting and
It's a public hearing, and those looks like comments, and they go to the board.
right, and so that if there's any, positives that want to be made. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. The next are the information items, and these are going to be presented by Cassandra Borchers, and about track term limits and the application process, and then about some bylaws.
So many of you will be interested to know how to reapply for the TRAC. We really do enjoy meeting with you all on a monthly basis. And for those of you whose terms are ending and you're eligible to reapply, we hope that you will, because we think that this is a really good group. But I wanted to go over with you what that process will be so that you can be prepared. So we do have some term-limited members, and we think we've discussed this casually before, but Gloria and Kimberly have served their time According to the bylaws, they have each served 2 terms. And the reason we have that item in the bylaws is to get always a fresh perspective. I think that in the reconstitution of this particular committee, we have found that there is a significant amount of people staying and people leaving the committee, and so we have had a nice mix of new and experienced faces around the table. But according to our current bylaws, those 2 wonderful ladies will be termed out at the end of this calendar year. Other folks whose terms will be expiring but are eligible to reapply are Mark O'Hara, Teresa Dunphy, Dave Kovar, Richard McDaniel, and Dave. So this will be your opportunity to finish your term, and then we would ask that you reapply so that we know that you are committed and will continue to serve in another term if selected. There are also other vacant positions that we have, and I think we mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. The way that we keep a full committee is we have alternates, and so when a position becomes vacant, when there is an alternate position for that group, we move the alternate person to a full voting member, and that restarts the clock on their terms. So what that means is that John Estock resigned from the committee, and then Renee moved in from the alternate position to the full voting member student position. As you heard today, Derek has done the same. Portia Smith has also resigned from the committee, and Corey announced last meeting that she's moving, so she will also be coming off. So we will be filling those vacant positions, sometimes for the alternate, and for the most part, that these are the positions that we will be recruiting for. So you will start to see advertisements on the buses asking for people to apply. We will not be listing these on there. We will take applications for all positions. We do keep those applications for at least 1 year. And what we are able to do is that during this recruitment period that we do every year, we then fill other vacant positions throughout the year with those applications that we get. We do take applications at any time during the year, but we do a strong recruitment period starting at the end of August every year. In this year, we'll start on the 28th of August and give people a little more than a month to fill out the application and send it in to us. The new 2-year term will begin in January, so you see a lot of new faces for those terms in January. For those watching at home, you can find this application on our website and either email it to Marianne or mail it in. We do ask that you have a statement of interest. I know that many of you have already written those, so you may have those from years past in order to refresh them. But we do take those statements of interest very seriously. If there is an application that does not have a statement of interest, we consider it incomplete. Once we receive those applications, staff reviews those applications. We make sure that all the positions are filled and that we have a level of diversity and equity across the county. So in our bylaws, we have 2 North County, 3 Mid County, and 2 South Counties. We make sure that we have that diversity as well as other diversity on the committee. And that is our process and our plan. So there is no decision today. This is just an information item, but I think it does start to prepare you all to see that on the buses, as well as prepare your applications if you are in a position to do so. Are there any questions about that?
We are eligible if we wanted to year. Yeah, it's Cassandra. It's for Kim and I, or anyone once they term out. Did we decide it was 6 months or a year that we go?
That's the next discussion.
Oh, that's the next. Oh, that's the bylaws. Okay.
6 months.
So Madam Chair, with your permission, I'll move on to
Oh,
the next
yes,
item.
please, yes.
And so we wanted to first lay out our current process and tell you what we do, and then talk about some editorial changes or some practice changes that we would recommend that you all make in the bylaws, as well as some better definition because of the term limits. So the bylaws were created when we reconstituted this committee, and the previous committee had about 20 people who met on Tuesday mornings at 10. So I know that's very difficult for a lot of people to get to, and some of the people who had been on that committee were on it for 20 years. And so that's one of the reasons that the term limits and the term limit discussion came up when we made the new TRAC committee, changed the meeting time, started to think about a lot of diversity, making sure that we had a variety of opinions. And so now that we're at the point where it's actually going to happen, where people are going to be term limited off, and there has been discussion about just natural turnover that we weren't having with the other committee, this now gives us an opportunity to discuss this. This would be a discussion today, and then we would bring any consensus ideas that come out of a discussion today would come back to you in the form of an action item next month or sometime later this year. So you have in your binders, and I think Mary Ann might have handed out existing bylaws. So here are some things that we would recommend and that you all could discuss today, again, for later action. So right now, we have terms that if you serve 2 consecutive terms, then you are then term limited off the committee. We would recommend that we add a clause to the bylaws indicating a 6-month waiting period for someone to reapply, meaning that if, for example, Gloria or Kimberly would like to reapply, that their term ends December 31st, they would be able to send us an application on July 1st. That does not mean that there will be an open position, and it may just get them in the cycle for the recruitment process. But if there is a vacancy that makes sense and we do not have a qualified applicant already in our stack of applications, then they may be considered. They would sit off a minimum of 6 months. More likely, it would be at least 1 year. The second proposed change is regarding the quorum notice. Right now, we ask for that you give us 24-hour notice. Once Mary Ann usually tries to send out a notice to let you all know that she would like to know if you are coming or not, and that helps us make sure that we can have the voting items at the committee. She hasn't been getting a 24-hour turnaround from everyone because maybe they don't check their personal email as much. So we'd like to give you a little bit extra time and make that a 48-hour requirement as opposed to a 24-hour requirement. Another proposed change is that when we have been changing a lot of the things that we are doing to more electronic distribution. In the first time this committee met, there were still some folks that needed things by paper, and that made the number of days that we had to give information needed to be much longer. So right now we do have agendas, and agendas are posted. Just the agenda itself are posted 7 days before, but we complete the packets usually the Friday before the meeting. That gives us about 3 days, and we do that for all of our committees, so all the board members are all of the backup package information. And so we'd like to change this to 3 days from the current 4 days. And those are the three items, and I'm happy to go back and talk about any one of them. Madam Chair.
Well, my one question is, this is an information item. At what way would you want this to be sort of codified? Does this need to be presented at a meeting as an action item and then voted upon? Okay, so like at the next meeting, So right now, we're just getting comment from people, I guess, do you agree with this, do you want to change it?
Yes.
And then, based on that, the next.
So there will be a second time to discuss, but this is just to get your initial feedback, and give you a chance to really think about it over the next month, as opposed to asking you to action something.
Right, okay. You?
Okay. I've been a little confused. There's 2 terms of 2 years while you're a member. Is that in addition to if you were an alternate? So if I was an alternate for a year, then became a member, a voting member? Is that how that?
It restarts.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So I actually might be coming to meetings for 5 years.
Yes.
Sitting at the table for 5 years, if you will. A year not voting and then 4 years voting before my term. Okay, that's great. I actually agree with that. Okay, I was concerned that the time as an alternate on any of us would have counted against it. That would be bad.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then I'd like to add, as part of my discussion, if we could say when you're re-accepted, so if I'm term limited off and then I say, well, I want to get back on, somehow, I don't even know how you would rephrase this, that if there were new people, they would get first choice. So if I was both student and North, and one of those open, but there was someone else North, let them go first. Or if there was another student, let them go first.
This is for us as
That's what the
staff
staff,
members.
I got it.
That's why the statements of interest are so important.
Got it.
Because if there are, we look at the most passionate and qualified candidates to
Got
sit
it.
on the committee.
As I was saying that, I figured out the solution. Got it.
Right. So, but we do keep those applications. Sometimes we have a very difficult time choosing our recommendations to the board. And we do keep those applications.
But it's so important to get, if someone new shows up and says, I'd like to be on it, the answer is yes. Let's get you out
Yes,
here.
we would like a lot of
Yeah.
new faces, and so we would encourage people,
Right.
new faces to apply, you know.
And that's what I'm doing on my Facebook, is putting.
But it's good to have new faces as alternates though sometimes too, because I know even for me, I never ultimately was an alternate, but
Right.
I started out as one, and that would have been fine for me to sort of learn what this is all about.
That's what I did. It was wonderful. It really helped.
Richard, I think you had a question.
Yes. So if somebody, like, let's just say Gloria is off the committee next year, and there's a vacancy, she applies after 6 months, she gets on for 2019. Her term would then start in 2020. She'd be filling out the 2019 of the other term, and then 2-year term, 20 and 21.
So we end all the terms at the end of the year. So if somebody comes on in like September, then they get 2 in a little bit.
Okay.
Because we end so we don't want to have terms ending every month, because that would just be too chaotic. So I guess they get a little bit extra, if that's what your question is.
Right.
Yeah, okay, another question is, are we still gonna get the agendas on Friday?
So you get the agenda packages on Friday. The agenda itself goes out a week before that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the items and then the backup materials come out a little bit later.
And last question is, so the business professional position, that's in the bylaws as far as what jobs are qualified?
Yes, there
Okay,
are,
all right.
yes, preference are given to certain professions
Okay.
that would lend themselves to the committee discussion.
That's it.
Other questions, anyone? Yes.
Not about that,
Oh,
I'm
oh.
sorry, but I just wanted to ask about the Flamingo. I've been running across a lot of them, different buses that don't work, more the trolleys than the buses.
Okay, well, let's save
So
this for the
that's-
member
And
comments.
a couple of the bus drivers I've talked to have said, one guy said, oh, this one never seems to work. They don't seem to be like they know an awful lot about it. And the gentleman that drove me today, he was really good. He loves it. He says, boy, that would save us so much more time. And we were talking about the fact, like, if you're putting your money on it and you want a day pass, how would he get it? How would an individual get a day pass? Or if you're a senior, you know, because when I go through it, it takes off too much, you know.
Okay, so
Just
we'll get to
We'll
that.
save that for the general comments, and I'll come right back.
Oh, okay,
to it,
I'm
and
sorry.
I can finish up with what Cassandra's doing on these information items. Okay, so are there any other questions about the bylaws? Okay.
I'm not, one last, I'm not certain if it was in the bylaws about us getting these packets. It's really sufficient to me to get an email. I'm glad we get ours here. Forward Pinellas actually mails them out, so it costs $2 and something each, and Tibarda does something different. I mean, it's plenty for me to get them on the phone. I read them, I keep them here, I see them up there. I don't know if that's in the agenda that says, save the trouble, save the paper, don't kill a tree. Just to make sure that that's not part of the requirement.
TRAC doesn't have the
They
laptop,
don't mail them
the tablet.
No, I know.
All of it's posted on the website.
As long as it's not required, I
Friday
just don't want it to
before.
be, if that's in there while we're changing the memo, let's say,
Yeah.
electronic delivery.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks
Yes,
for
thank
putting
you.
that together. And I think if any of you have any questions or thoughts, any other thoughts on the bylaws or this information, we all know Mary Ann and Cassandra. Yes.
Can I just ask a question about how people feel about the 6-month waiting period for an application? Is that, because I know there was some.
You mean for a re-up thing?
Yes, so that you sort of missed that, chances are the position that somebody had would be filled.
You still wouldn't be, there would still be a 1-year gap, though.
There would kind, yeah, there is,
Applying.
like,
And I
we're
think
setting
a
it up to
1-year gap
just
makes
still
a
be a
lot of
1-year
sense,
gap, yes.
Right, but with a 6-month.
6-month
before you can
application
apply.
waiting period.
Yeah, I love the idea of fresh people, and I mean, I'm gonna be heartbroken to leave, but at the same time, when I think back on even when I started, the turnover of different people and the different tone and the different ideas that come, new people always bring in great ideas, and of course, the old people, but those of us who've been on for a while, we have a lot of experience there, so it's a good mix. Thank you. All right, excellent. Okay.
I'm thinking of my condo board or a club that has had the same leaders for 20 years, as you say, they're just, it's not good.
Okay, so the next item is just member comments. And Teresa, you were talking about the Flamingo Fairs as your comment. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about that?
Right, well, just, I just wondered how that does work. If the bus driver and I were talking, he said, well, what about a one-day pass? If you use the bus 5 times a day, so some people do, that would be coming off the $250 every time. I said, well, how would you give them a one-day pass? And he didn't have any idea.
So, one of the things that we'll be bringing to you is a new fare policy and how we handle that. So, the cards and the mobile app will be set up in a way that does fare capping. So what that means is every time you swipe or tap, you will pay the full cash fare until you hit the cap. So what that means is if you ride one time, it's $2.25. You ride a second time the same day, it's $2.25. You ride a third time, it's 50 cents. You ride a fourth time, it's free. So you'll never pay more than $5 a day. So the other part of that is we're also going to cap on the monthly. So right now our monthly is $70. One of the things that riders have, that we've heard from people that they have a hard time with, is sometimes coming up with the money for a monthly pass. If they're not on the TD program, coming up with $70 can sometimes be a challenge. But if you can come up with $10 and then it's $10 more and $10 more, you can put it on the card whenever you have it. But what the card will take care of is how many times you use that. So it'll cap you $5 one day, $5 another day, $5 another day, from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. Once you hit $70 or the value of a monthly pass, it will be free for the rest of the month. So I think at $5 a day, it's something like 14 days. So if you ride the first 14 days of the month, you hit that $5 every single time, you'll have 16 to 17 days free.
What's more important than that, I'm sorry to interrupt, what's more important is if you break your leg on the 8th of the month, you don't end up, there's this thought that I bought a monthly pass, I used it a couple days, and now I got sick, or my mom's ill and I ran out of town, that pass is expired and I didn't get to use it. With the Flamingo, which is so great, I paid 3-4 days, and the rest of the month I didn't pay for.
Right.
So you buy your monthly pass in arrears, only if you use it. It's the greatest thing in the world. It's wonderful.
Well, and how does that work with a senior student?
So right now, our plan for reduced fares is that you would have to register and set your card up and your
That's what I was
account
thinking.
up to get that discount. So you would do the same thing, you pay $1.10, you know, and then you'd get to $2.50, which is the
Right.
daily cap, and then $35, which is the monthly cap. But you would have to, it's an account-based system, so the account is attached to you, so you would have to register the account and qualify for the discount.
Well, how are they, I mean, how is it progressing at this point, the Flamingo? Are they? I mean,
Well, we're testing it, and so it's
Still in the
we're
testing.
still testing in the testing phase. I think maybe we could have Spressa come back either next
Sure.
month
Yeah.
or the month after and kind of give you all an update. I mean, she's the technology company that's working with us is seeing the things that you're seeing,
Right.
right? They're noticing the issues, if there's a particular bus that has an issue, if there's a particular route that has an issue, they're sort of working through that.
Well, I write them all down, the ones that I've
I
taken,
call
I've
them
been
in
traveling a lot, so I have
Yes.
some, the different bus numbers and the dates that they didn't work, but like the one I know on the beach doesn't work, I haven't been on it in a week, I don't know, I know 2 weeks ago it wasn't working.
So all of that needs to go to
Driver
Spressa.
said like, if it was close to him, he said how much time it possibly could save, because people don't always know. I guess it's because just people are experimenting with it now, but he thinks it's great. Some of the others don't want to be bothered.
It's great.
The whole idea is for it to be as fast as possible.
Right,
It does
that-
really
yeah,
speed
because it is,
up
because when it
boarding.
works, you just, you know, there's no way.
We are running low on time. Are there any other member comments? Well, I think that's right. I think we'll get Spressa to come in and talk and answer more questions.
I'll say one sentence.
Yes.
I put together a presentation on walkable streets that I gave at a book club. If any of you have a book club, a condo club, a card party, that you'd like a free speaker, I'm your guy. I can come out and talk about neighborhoods and parks and transit and how it all goes together.
Oh,
It's about a
that sounds
45-minute,
great.
it's free. I'll work for chips and soda, as you know. So I'll come out, and if you've got a club that wants to see something new, especially, everybody's always looking for a speaker, I'm your guy.
Great, thank you.
Anywhere in the county.
And I know you have to go, but just a couple things. We got word today that DOT is going to give us $100,000 for our autonomous vehicle project.
Yay.
We're still working on, so you'll hear about that more soon. And as I mentioned, we'll have a number of grant proposals, grant acceptances through our finance committee tomorrow. So it's also very exciting.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll adjourn the meeting. Next meeting is September 18th.
Should I buy the all-day pass? Or the one, I usually tend to go out and do that, and I'll take yeah, well, all day, yeah. And
I was always like that, I got some
so I buy an all-day, and then I only took one.